The suit cost me $412 at the JCPenney out by the interstate. I remember because the tag was still tucked into the inside pocket when I left the house that morning. And my wife Carol, God rest her, would have laughed at me for forgetting to cut it off. She always did the suits. 63 years of marriage, and I never once bought my own dress shirt before she passed. 3 years on, and I'm still learning. I parked the truck 2 blocks down from the country club because I didn't want anyone seeing the rust spots on the tailgate. 67 years old, and there I was, walking down a cobblestone driveway in shoes that pinched, holding a card with $200 cash inside it because my granddaughter Mackenzie was getting married, and her mother. My daughter had told me 3 weeks earlier on the phone that checks feel a little tacky, Dad. Tacky. That was the word she used. I'd written checks to that girl for 38 years. Diapers. Braces. A used Honda Civic when she turned 17. Her wedding to Mackenzie's father. Paid in full. $22,000 in $1998, which my accountant Tom likes to remind me is closer to $43,000 today. Her divorce 3 years later. The condo in Charlotte after that. Mackenzie's tuition at Wake Forest every semester for 4 years. $86,000 I pulled out of an IRA I'd been building since 1981. And now checks were tacky. So I had cash in an envelope, and I was walking up to the front door of the Briarcliff Country Club outside Asheville, North Carolina, and I was telling myself for the 10th time that morning that today wasn't about me. It was about Mackenzie. She was a sweet kid. She always had been. She used to ride on my shoulders at the state fair when she was 4, and she still called me every Sunday at noon. Regular as clockwork, even from college. The mother was the problem. The mother had always been the problem, but you don't say that out loud, not to anybody, not even to yourself when you're trying to be a good father. The girl at the front desk looked maybe 22. She had a clipboard and one of those headset microphones like she was directing air traffic instead of pointing people toward folding chairs. Name? She said, not looking up. Walter Henley, I'm the bride's grandfather. She ran her finger down the list. Once. Twice. Then she did look up. Sir, I'm not seeing you on the family list. Are you sure you're in the right place? I told her I was sure. I told her my daughter Diane Henley Prescott had personally invited me. I told her I'd RSVP'd by phone 6 weeks ago. The girl smiled the way young people smile when they think you're confused. She picked up a walkie-talkie and murmured something into it, and I stood there in my $400 suit with my envelope of cash, and I felt my collar getting tight. A woman came out from the ballroom. Tall, blonde, wearing one of those dresses that probably cost more than my truck. I didn't recognize her at first because I hadn't seen her in person in almost 2 years, and people change, especially when they're trying to. Dad. Diane stopped about 6 feet short of me. She didn't hug me. I didn't think you were coming. Of course I'm coming. It's my granddaughter's wedding. Right, of course. She glanced at the girl with the clipboard, then back at me. Her voice dropped. Dad, listen. The thing is, the family seating section it's pretty tight. The Prescotts have a big family, and Brad's parents flew in 22 people from Boston, and we just didn't. There isn't really a spot at the family tables. I looked at her. I waited. There's a section in the back, she said. It's lovely. It's where some of the work friends are sitting. The view of the gardens is actually better from back there. The work friends. That's what she called them. The work friends. I want you to understand something. I didn't get angry. I didn't raise my voice. I have a temper. Carol used to say I had the slowest fuse and the loudest bang of any man in 3 counties. But I have learned over 6 decades of being a man that the worst thing you can do in a moment like that is let people see you bleed. So I nodded. I told her that was fine. I told her the garden sounded lovely. And I walked past her and the clipboard girl and into the ballroom, and I found my way to the back, and I sat down at a round table next to a woman I didn't know who turned out to be Brad's college roommate's wife. Brad. That's the groom. I'd met him exactly twice. He worked in something called private equity. He had a jaw that looked drawn, with a ruler and a handshake that felt rehearsed. Mackenzie loved him, though, and that was supposed to be enough. The ceremony was outside on a stone patio with vines climbing up trellises. I watched my granddaughter walk down the aisle on the arm of her father, her actual father, my former son-in-law Greg, who I'd always liked even after the divorce. And she was beautiful. There's no other word. She had Carol's eyes. She had Carol's way of tilting her head when she smiled. And when she said "I do," I felt my chest tighten in a way I haven't felt since the funeral, and I had to look down in my shoes for a long moment to keep myself together. After the ceremony, while everyone else was sipping champagne on the lawn, I went looking for the bathroom. That's when I overheard it. I was around the corner in a hallway lined with portraits of dead golfers, and Diane was standing by the bar with two women I didn't know. One of them was asking about her father. "Oh, that's not my father," Diane said. "That's just an old family friend. He drove my mother around when she was sick. We try to include him in things. It's the kind of thing you do." The woman she was talking to said something I couldn't quite hear. Diane laughed. "Lord, no," she said. "My father was a lawyer. He passed years ago. I stood there in that hallway with my hand on the wall, and I could not move. I want to be honest with you. I could not move. My father was a foreman at the Champion Paper Mill in Canton, North Carolina. I worked at that same mill for 41 years. I retired as a maintenance supervisor in 2017, with a pension and a gold watch and a handshake from a kid named Ryan, who was younger than my granddaughter. I have never been a lawyer. I have never been an old family friend. I am Walter James Henley, and the woman by the bar laughing about a dead lawyer was the baby I held in my arms in Mission Hospital on March 14, 1981, while Carol slept off the anesthesia. I went to the bathroom. I splashed water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror, and I thought about what Carol would say if she was standing next to me. She'd been gone 3 years and 4 months, and I still asked her opinion on everything. She'd say, "Walter, don't make a scene." That's what she'd say. "Walter, don't make a scene at our granddaughter's wedding." So I didn't. I went back out to the lawn. I drank a glass of champagne that tasted like rust. I made small talk with Brad's college roommate's wife about her cat. And I waited. I waited through the receiving line, where Diane introduced me to her future in-laws as Walter, an old friend of the family. I waited through the cocktail hour. I waited through the seating shuffle, where I confirmed for myself that I was indeed at table 19, in the back by the kitchen door, where the waiters kept bumping my chair. And then the toast started. The maid of honor went first, then the best man, then Brad's father, who told a long story about Brad's first sailboat. And then, when I expected Diane to stand up, something different happened. Mackenzie stood up. She had the microphone. She was looking down at her plate, and then she looked up, and her eyes went straight across the room to me, to table 19, to the back, by the kitchen. "Before my mom says anything," she said, "I want to say something." The room got quiet in that particular way. A room gets quiet when nobody knows what's coming. "I want to thank my grandfather, Walter Henley." She said my name clear and slow, the way you say a name you want people to remember. Most of you don't know him because my mother decided a long time ago that he didn't fit the picture she wanted to paint of our family. But he is the reason I am standing here in this dress. He paid for every semester of my college. He paid for my study abroad in Florence. He paid for the deposit on my first apartment when I moved to Charlotte for my job. And he never, not once, asked for anything back. Not a thank you card, not a phone call, nothing. She was crying now. Brad reached up and put his hand on the small of her back. My grandpa worked at the paper mill in Canton for 41 years. His hands are rough because he earned them that way. He is a mill worker. He is a maintenance man. He is the proudest, kindest, most honest man I have ever known. And I am not going to stand up here in a dress he bought and let anyone in this room pretend he is anything less than what he is. She lifted her glass. Her hand was shaking. "To my grandfather, the reason any of this is possible. The room, and I'm telling you the truth, the room did not know what to do. There were maybe 200 people there, and most of them had no idea who I was, and 150 of them slowly turned their heads to look at table 19. To look at me, the old man by the kitchen door. And then somebody, I think it was Greg, my former son-in-law, somebody started clapping. And then somebody else. And then the whole room was on its feet, clapping. and I was sitting there with a wadded napkin in my hand and tears running into my collar, and Diane was at the head table, frozen, her wine glass halfway to her mouth, her face the color of skim milk. I stood up. I had to. The whole room was waiting. I lifted my glass. I said, "To Mackenzie, the best of all of us." I sat back down. That was it. That was the whole moment. It lasted maybe 90 seconds and it changed everything. The reception went on. People came up to my table for the rest of the night. Brad's father came over and shook my hand and apologized for the seating, which he said he hadn't known about. Brad's mother gave me a hug. A man whose name I never caught told me about his own father, who'd worked at a steel mill in Pittsburgh. People kept refilling my glass. I felt like I was floating in some warm, strange liquid. But here's the thing. Here's the thing nobody tells you about moments like that. You can be vindicated in front of 200 people and still drive home at midnight, alone, in a truck that smells like motor oil, and feel the cold spot in the bed where your wife used to sleep. The applause stops. The lights go out. And the question you have to answer is, what now? I drove home that night to the house Carol and I bought in 1976. I sat at the kitchen table and I poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon, and I thought about what I was going to do, because Mackenzie's toast was beautiful. It was the proudest moment I've had since Carol passed, but it didn't change what Diane had said in that hallway. It didn't change what she'd done with the seating. It didn't change 38 years of slowly being shaved down into an old family friend who drove your mother around when she was sick. And it sure didn't change the fact that on Monday morning, I had an appointment. See, Carol and I had been planning to update our trust for about a year before she got sick. We never got around to it. After she passed, I just left it. I couldn't face the paperwork. The trust as it stood gave Diane the house, the savings, the IRA, the mineral rights on a piece of land my father left me in Haywood County, and the lump sum payout on my pension. About $1.4 million all told, most of which I'd built one paycheck at a time over 4 decades while wearing safety glasses and steel-toed boots, fixing pulpers and chip conveyors and any other piece of machinery that broke at 3 in the morning. Mackenzie was a contingent beneficiary. If Diane predeceased me, it would skip to her. But as it stood, Diane got everything. Monday morning at 9, I sat across from my attorney, a woman named Ruth Kowalski who'd handled my affairs for 20-some years. I told her what had happened at the wedding. I told her about the hallway. I told her about Mackenzie's toast. Ruth listened the way good lawyers listen, which is to say, she didn't interrupt and she didn't make a face. When I was done, she said, "Walter, what do you want to do?" I told her. She drew up the new documents that afternoon. I came back Tuesday and signed them. Diane was removed as a beneficiary, not partially. Entirely. The house in Canton, the savings, the IRA, the Haywood County land, all of it would now pass to Mackenzie, with a small portion going to a scholarship fund at the local community college in Carol's name for the children of mill workers. The pension benefit would terminate on my death, as those things do. But Ruth had one more question. "What about the support payments?" she said. I had to think about that. Because for the past 11 years, I'd been sending Diane $1,500 a month. It started after her divorce, when she said she was struggling. It was supposed to be a temporary thing. It became a permanent thing. $1,500 a month for 11 years is $198,000. I'd never thought about it in those terms. I just sent the check. Carol had sent it before she died, and after she passed, I kept sending it, because that's what we'd done. I told Ruth to stop the payments, effective immediately. I also told her something else. I told her about the condo in Charlotte that Diane lived in. The condo I had been quietly paying the property tax and HOA fees on since 2014, because Diane couldn't quite swing it with her job in pharmaceutical sales. A job, I'll add, that paid her about $140,000 a year. The condo was technically in her name. The taxes and fees I could stop covering any time. I told Ruth to stop those too, effective immediately. And then there was the credit card. The American Express I put her on as an authorized user for emergencies back in 2009. I asked Ruth to call the company and have her removed. Ruth said I could do that myself with one phone call. I made the call from her office. It took 6 minutes. Ruth walked me out to the parking lot. She's a tough woman, Ruth. Polish grandmother, 2 ex-husbands, raised 3 boys. She doesn't sentimentalize. Walter, she said. You sure? I told her I was sure. It's going to get loud, she said. I told her I knew. It got loud Wednesday morning. Diane called at 7:42 a.m. I let it go to voicemail. She called again at 7:44, and 7:46, and 7:44. By 8 o'clock, she'd left 4 voicemails, and the last one was screaming. By 9, my phone had 32 missed calls, and she was driving up from Charlotte. She showed up at my house at 11:30. I was on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the Cardinals at the feeder Carol had hung in '04. Diane came up the walk in heels that weren't made for gravel, and her face was a kind of red I had never seen before. What did you do? She said. Not hello. What did you do? I told her to sit down. I pointed to the rocking chair. She didn't sit. She paced. American Express called me. They said I'd been removed. The property tax office called about the condo. The bank called about the auto deposit. What is happening, Dad? What did you do? I sipped my coffee. I made some changes, I said. Changes? Changes. Dad, I have a mortgage. Mackenzie just got married. Do you have any idea what that cost? I have some idea, I said. I paid for most of it. She stopped pacing. Dad, sit down, Diane. She sat. I'm going to tell you what I said next, and I'm going to tell you straight, because I've gone over it in my head 100 times since, and I want to remember it exactly. I said, on Saturday, in the hallway between the men's room and the bar, you told 2 women you'd never met that I was an old family friend. You told them your father was a lawyer who'd passed away. I heard you. I was standing 6 feet behind you. You didn't see me. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. I have spent 38 years, I said, loving you, paying for you, being told what to wear when I came to see you, being told not to mention the mill, being told not to tell your friends what I did for a living. I let it go, Diane. I let it all go. Because your mother said you'd come around. She said you were going through something. She said be patient. So I was patient for 38 years. Dad, I'm not finished. She closed her mouth. On Saturday, you put me at table 19, by the kitchen, while Brad's family flew in from Boston and sat at table 2. And I'd have sat there. I'd have eaten my chicken and drunk my champagne and gone home. And I'd never have said a word about it, because that's what I do. That's what I've always done. I leaned forward, but then you stood there in that hallway and told 2 women I had never been your father. And I realized something, Diane. I realized I have been your father for 38 years, and you have not been my daughter for at least 20 of them. You've been a recipient, and I have been an ATM with a Christmas card list. That is not fair. It's exactly fair. It's the most fair thing I have said to you in 2 decades. She started to cry. I want to be clear, I watched my daughter cry many times in my life. When she fell off her bike in 1986, when her cat died in 1992, when she got divorced in 2001, I have always reached for her. I have always pulled her in. I did not reach for her. I sat in my rocking chair and I drank my coffee and I let her cry. Dad, please, please, I didn't mean it. Those women are clients, Dad. They're at my company. I know what you were trying to do. You were trying to be someone you aren't. And the fastest way to do that, you decided, was to pretend the man who raised you doesn't exist. I will fix it. I will tell them. I will tell everyone. Just please, Dad. The condo, the card, please. The condo is in your name, Diane. It's yours. You'll pay the taxes and the fees yourself, like every other adult in America. The credit card was never yours. It was mine. The monthly transfer was a gift, not an obligation, and gifts can stop. What about Mom's house, she said. What about I knew what she was asking. I've been waiting for it. The trust has been amended, I said. The house, the savings, the IRA, the land, all of it goes to Mackenzie when I'm gone. Some to Carol's scholarship fund, nothing to you. I'll never forget her face. The way it went still. The way the crying stopped. All at once, like somebody hit a switch. You can't do that, she said. I already did. I'm your daughter. He told 2 women on Saturday that I was a family friend who drove your mother around when she was sick. You didn't tell them I was the one who slept in the chair next to her bed for the last 6 months of her life. You didn't tell them I was the one who fed her ice chips when she couldn't keep water down. You didn't tell them that because the truth didn't fit your story. She stood up. She was shaking. I will contest the will. You're welcome to try. Ruth assures me you'll lose. Mackenzie won't take the money. She'll give it back to me. I almost laughed at that. I want you to know how close I came to laughing. Diane, I said, Mackenzie stood up at her own wedding and told 200 people that she was ashamed of how you treated me. She is 26 years old, and she has more spine than I had at 40. She will not give you a dime. And I will tell you something else. The day after the wedding, she called me. She apologized for her mother. She cried on the phone for 20 minutes. She is, and has always been, the best of us. And the best of us does not include you. Diane left without another word. She got in her Lexus and she drove down the gravel and out onto Old Buncombe Road. And I sat on the porch and I watched her go. And I waited to feel something. I want to tell you I felt triumph. I want to tell you I felt vindicated. I want to tell you any of those clean, satisfying things that people feel in the movies. I felt tired. I felt old. I felt like a man who had finally put down a sack he'd been carrying for so long that his shoulders had grown around the strap. That was 8 months ago. Diane and I have not spoken. She sent a letter in October, 4 pages, handwritten. I read it once and put it in a drawer. It said a lot of things. It said she was sorry. It said she was Ari. It said she was in therapy. It said she understood now. I am 67 years old and I have lived long enough to know that I understand now usually means I want my old life back. I haven't written her back. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. Carol would tell me to. Carol would say a father always leaves the door cracked. And maybe she's right. I'm still thinking about it. Mackenzie comes up to Canton every other weekend. She and Brad bought a fixer-upper in Black Mountain. And Brad, I'll give him this. Brad has turned out to be a decent kid. He shows up at my house in a Carhartt jacket and lets me show him how to plumb a sink. He calls me sir and means it. Last Sunday, Mackenzie told me she's pregnant. A boy due in June. They want to name him James after my father, the foreman at the mill. I cried when she told me. I am not too proud to admit it. I sat at my kitchen table and I cried. And Mackenzie held my hand and Brad pretended to be very interested in the cabinet hardware so I could have my moment. I want to tell you something. If you're listening to this and you've been kept small by somebody you love, by somebody who's supposed to love you back, I want you to hear me. There is a difference between forgiveness and access. You can forgive somebody and still not let them back in. You can love your child with your whole heart and still refuse to be a stranger in their life. You can be generous for 40 years and still, on the 41st year, decide that generosity has to flow toward people who know how to say thank you. The mill closed in 2019. They tore the buildings down 2 years later. There's a Walmart there now, on the same ground where I worked third shift for 4 decades. Sometimes I drive past it, and I think about all the men I worked with. Tommy Whitaker, who lost 3 fingers in a press in '88 and went back to work the next month because he had 4 kids. Earl Buchanan, who taught me how to shim a bearing without a level. Carlos Mendez, who came up from Honduras when he was 19 and retired the year before I did. Honest men, all of them. Men who built things and fixed things and went home tired and kissed their wives. My daughter spent 38 years being ashamed of where she came from. My granddaughter is naming her son after my father. I sleep fine at night. I sleep better than I have in 20 years. That envelope of cash I brought to the wedding, I never gave it to anyone. I drove it home in my coat pocket. 2 weeks later, I walked into the financial aid office at AB Tech Community College, and I dropped $200 on the counter and asked them how I could start a scholarship fund in my wife's name. The woman at the desk said it usually took a minimum of $10,000 to start a named fund. I told her I'd be back. I went back the next month with a check for $50,000. Carol Henley Memorial Scholarship for the children of skilled tradespeople in Haywood and Buncombe counties. First check went out last spring. Kid named Diego, going into HVAC. He sent me a thank you card, handwritten. I keep it on the refrigerator, right next to a picture of Mackenzie at 6 years old, sitting on my shoulders at the state fair, holding a candy apple bigger than her face. That's the picture I look at every morning. That's the family I have. I've thought a lot in these 8 months about how a person becomes the kind of woman my daughter Diane became. She wasn't born ashamed of me. I held her in my arms in 1981, and she didn't care that my hands had calluses. She rode on my shoulders at the state fair, and she didn't care that I smelled like the mill. Somewhere between then and the hallway at the Briarcliff Country Club, something turned, and I've come to believe it turns slowly, the way water wears down a stone. Every time I let her tell a friend I worked in management. Every time I changed out of my work clothes before her piano recitals. Every time Carol and I smiled and said nothing when Diane corrected us at the dinner table. We thought we were being kind. We were teaching her that the truth of who we were was something to manage. And a child who learns that lesson well enough will one day stand in a hallway and call our father a stranger. That's the thing about cause and effect. It doesn't show up the day you make the choice. It shows up 30 years later in a country club, in a sentence you didn't see coming. I won't pretend I'm proud of every choice I made after that wedding. Cutting off your own child is not a clean feeling. There's no version of it that doesn't ache, but I have learned late in life that there's a difference between being a good man and being a useful one. For 38 years, I confused the two. I thought if I kept paying, kept showing up small, kept making myself easy to overlook, that was love. It wasn't. It was fear wearing a nice suit. I was afraid that if I stopped being useful, I stopped being family. So I never tested it. And Diane, in her way, never had to choose me because she never had to live without my checks. What I want any man my age to understand, any father, any grandfather, anybody who has spent a lifetime quietly carrying somebody else's reputation, is that your dignity is not a luxury. It is the foundation. If you let people chip at it long enough, your children grow up on cracked ground, and they pass that crack on to theirs. Mackenzie stood up at her wedding and said what she said, because somewhere along the way somebody had to break the pattern. I like to think I broke it the day I called Ruth, but the truth is, Mackenzie broke it first. She is 26 years old, and she had the courage I didn't find until I was 67. You build character the same way you build anything worth keeping. One honest day at a time. You tell the truth about who you are. You tell it kindly, and you tell it without shame. And if the people around you can't hold that truth, you find people who can. That's not bitterness. That's clarity. And clarity, I have come to believe, is the best inheritance a man can leave behind.